comes the night. Hold me and love me. Ooh. Here comes the night.
You've probably heard of the Beach Boys. I would guess pretty much everybody has. But I want to give you a kind of a quick summary of the stuff that I found about them. There is a lot that's been written about them. If you want to dig in more, do go looking. So they were formed in California in 1961 by brothers Carl, Brian, and Dennis Wilson, and also included their cousin Mike Love and their friend Al Jardine. They pioneered and are most famous for their surf sound, which they did in the early 60s, which was happy, shiny songs about surfing with complex vocal harmonies in a style that was related to doo-wop, and I think relates even further back to barbershop. Then the Beatles happened and the so-called British invasion, at which point the popularity of surf music waned. And although this is a bit of a simplistic view of what happened, the Beach Boys attempted to keep pace with the increasing complexity and maturity of pop that was emerging out of that. And possibly out of all the American bands that were affected in this, they probably did the best job of reacting to that. There's been, in the years since, a lot of toing and froing, arguments between members, changing level of involvements, a few member changes, friendship with Charles Manson that went sour, involvement with the same Indian guru as the Beatles, and of course they released Pet Sounds, which is one of the most celebrated albums of all time and certainly one of the most innovative of its time. They kind of survived sometimes more off than on since 1961, and they've produced 29 studio albums in total. Just over half of those were released in the 60s. My name's Dan. So this was the 13th studio album by the Beach Boys, and it's my first time listening to it. So, I don't often do this, kind of go through the context for an album, but I think for this album it is fairly important. So in 1966, the Beach Boys released Pet Sounds, which was hugely well thought of. That was their 11th album. It was a huge hit, very well regarded, and it was very complex in its creation. They attempted to follow this with Smile, and the development and creation of Smile caused huge problems for them, and particularly for Brian Wilson, who was producing. I think it nearly caused a breakdown for him. It may even have actually done so literally. And they ended up releasing a strange, changed version of this called Smiley Smile, which tanked compared to their other albums. It didn't go down well with the public or with critics, excuse me. So not long after that, they took a swing sideways, and this album is a swing into soul. And this was partly a response of having been labelled as choir boys. They wanted to kind of move away from that thought, but also they didn't want to embrace psychedelic rock, which is where a lot of bands were going at this point in time. This was 1967, which was the summer of love and all that sort of stuff. So, description, songs is almost entirely done, interestingly, with electric bass, honky-tonk piano, and a rock organ, which is a tone wheel organ. And it was only fairly recently I discovered how those things work. I'm not going to go into details, but go and find out if you're interested in these things, because it's fascinating. And then with some percussion, but not drum kits. Also, it doesn't do, in general, the Beach Boys harmony thing, having all of them singing at once in this kind of complex harmony stuff. But it does often have Beach Boys style shifts and chordage, the kind of chord progressions used. That kind of feels like a Beach Boys chord progression. It's an odd album. It's got a really weird feel to it, to my mind. Now, I feel like I'm possibly going to upset some people by not having the best opinion of this album. I'm sorry, I can only give you the opinion that I've got. I don't try and pretend to like something because I think other people want me to like it, or I try not to, and I don't try and pretend to dislike something because other people turn their nose up at it. Um, and I'm sorry when either of those, and particularly when I like something and other people don't, when that kind of upsets people. But it's the point of a review is to say what I think. And what I think here is that I don't have a great feel for this album. So let's get back into some details. It initially sold badly for a Beach Boys album and initially didn't review well either. But retrospectively, it's got better appraisal. But for me, it feels like the wheels had fallen off at this point. It was praised for its kind of, homebrew aesthetic and bringing music back away from the wild productions of, well, certainly of Pet Sounds. Um, but again, having read that, I still didn't kind of feel like I got it, or I can see why some people really resonated with this album. So what I tend to do is I have two listens. I listen, read, then listen again, and so I get as blind a read as I can. Obviously, I knew who the Beach Boys were, and I knew some stuff about them. I didn't know where in their career this album was. I didn't know the context. I didn't know any of this background here. And then I had another listen afterwards, having done the read. So that gives me an informed listen. Before that, I read that this was a deliberate move into soul. I didn't know what to make of it. Then, in my second listen, I was thinking of it as soul, or trying to think of it as soul, but I wasn't convinced particularly. So musically, it does go some of the way, and some tracks more than others, I would say. But I think the lack of uh, solid percussion and drums is a detriment to that quite a lot of the time. For me, the real problem with it being with trying to, and it may just be that I need to expand my idea of what soul is, but the real problem for me is the vocals. So the strength of the Beach Boys for me, or the biggest strength, was this amazing blend of the voices that they have or had. But I found that when they singing solo on this album, it doesn't have the the thickness, the gutsiness that soul needs. And I think that it's the very same thing that makes their harmonies work so well is I'm going to say thin, but that sounds negative, but it's uh, that kind of, yeah, pared down feel of the vocals that means they blend well together is the same thing that means it doesn't work for me as soul. Maybe other people will agree with me. I have no idea. Um, so, uh, if the songs had been particularly interesting, I might have forgiven it quite a lot. But the songs are relatively fairly banal stuff. It's normal for the Beach Boys. Normally, with the Beach Boys, the thing that I'm enjoying is the kind of the music and the harmonies and the production and stuff. Apart from the ending of "I'd love to see," "Love Just Wants to See You," which is quite an interesting little kind of pull up. I misheard the backing vocals of "I Was Made to Love You." Apparently, I'm not alone in that. I did double check them. You might mishear them. So if you think that they're saying something that's a bit rude, they're apparently not. And I would confirm that I think they're not. The last track is probably my favourite track on the album. It's got vocal harmonies. This is obviously the thing that um, I'm holding against this album is that it doesn't have these vocal harmonies, and it does have. And Mama says it's quite a short track. It repeats a few phrases, and is in context or content is at least interesting because it's got this kind of homey content, which so I don't like referring too much to other things, but some of the stuff from Smile and then Smiley Smile, the version they came out with, and there was a particular song that was all about vegetables, and it was just having this, looking at mundane stuff, but then doing songs about it. And this is has that kind of homey mundaneness to it as well, which is can be quite interesting. It's also an interesting exploration of styles and time signatures and a kind of demonstration of some skill with his vocals. So, other than that, generally, I would say I'm not a fan of this album. I wouldn't say it absolutely stinks. It just didn't really resonate with me very much at all. And as always, I'd like to invite you to tell me what you think of this album on this occasion, what you think of me, and how wrong you think I am, if that's what you think. Please do share what your thoughts are. Let's have some discussion. I'd love to know what other people see in this album, if people think it's brilliant, because obviously I didn't get it. So please do help me out here. That's it from me for now.
Eat a lot, sleep a lot, brush 'em like crazy. Run a lot, do a lot, never be lazy. Eat a lot, sleep a lot, brush 'em like crazy. Run a lot, do a lot, never